What's up guys, it's the Hunter Project here. Welcome to my channel where you'll find Monster Hunter news, builds, playthroughs and everything in between. Today I'll be going over a part of Monster Hunter Rise's endgame that is missing and I think should be included in the 3.0 update, or maybe even sometime soon after if they have to take more time to implement it, and that is the Apex monster armors. I know a lot of others have mentioned this, and I have seen it in like comment sections of various videos and Reddit posts, and how this is it's quite a missed opportunity on Capcom's part. I think it is quite unusual as to how they've not added the armors into the game for the corresponding Apex monsters, as they've obviously added 2 new Apex monsters to the April update, and then they're most likely going to add 1 or 2 in the May update. But of course there are quite a few reasonable potential reasons as to why they have not implemented them yet, and the first one of course being the obvious one, and that is time constraints, or I could say COVID constraints, as we know a lot of the content was held off until April and May's updates that were intended to be in the base game, but unfortunately due to COVID were inevitably pushed back. And I feel like they could have possibly, if they had the intention to add armors before the G expansion, I feel like they could have held back with all the Apex monsters, as I feel like they wouldn't have made too big of an impact of not being in the game, as long as we knew they were coming. And I feel like if they did hold them back a bit, made their armors to go with their releases, it would have been a lot nicer, and that of course wasn't the case. So therefore it leads me to my second possible reason, and that one being the most likely reason, at least in my head, and that is they're holding them out until the G expansion. That's where they will flesh out what they drop, as well as where their materials can be directed for the player's progression. And the one good part about this is the fact that they already have a potential basis for the armor designs, considering the monsters are based on the deviant forms from Generations Ultimate. So it is understandable if the developers make the Apex armors based on the deviant armor designs, and of course this also means that the developers won't need to take too much time in thinking up a design for the armors, and instead just need to recreate the armor in the new engine, and then maybe even tweak it a tiny bit to fix the Apex style rather than deviant. And I think this would be a great way for them to add to the endgame and further diversify the endgame armor and meta overall, assuming that they bring along a few skills that can fill in the gaps for various builds that are hard to get right now without the right charm, which can be annoying because of course there are a few builds out there which fully rely on the charm. So if you don't have the right charm, you just can't really max out that build, and it feels a tiny bit like it's missing a vital part of it, which can be annoying. I'm sure there's probably people out there who are still missing that weakness exploit level 2. And the one thing about this that I am a bit uncertain about is of course when the Apex armors will come, and as to whether or not they will be implemented at all. And I think that it probably is on Capcom's radar, but I'm just curious as to what the actual reason is as to why they've not added them in yet, as I feel like right now is the time when we need our endgame to be of course just fleshed out a tiny bit more, because I feel like people are still hitting an area where the game's becoming stale again. So of course they do have our 999 cap, but then again we only have so much we can do at endgame right now, and even then the 100%ing the game right now is quite easy to do in a sense if you got enough time, and it's not that much time that you will need. It is quite easy to do so unless you have really bad RNG with the crowns. I can't really see too much time being sunk into the game, at least for the current time, as we don't have an insane amount of content, which once again is understandable because they had the COVID constraints, and I'm guessing there probably was a reason as to why they couldn't push back the game further, which is absolutely understandable. But that obviously just make sure you don't think that I think this is a bad game. It's a fantastic game. I just still think the Apex armors could have just spiced up the end game a tiny bit more, but unfortunately we haven't got them yet, and we're not sure when we'll be getting them. I think the Apex system just overall could be fleshed out to make the end game a bit more longer lasting, in a sense similar to how previous games had done their amped up monster systems, like the hyper system and the tempered system, I am hoping that they do add some like unique gear that is tied to their hunts, and like the materials that drop from the specific standalone hunts separate from the rampages, and just to fully flesh everything out. I think this is extremely likely and plausible for it to be added to the game at some point, but once again, like I said before, right now we can't really say when they'll add it in because we don't even know if it's on Capcom's radar. And of course they did obviously give us materials that we could use towards the rampage like items, and we know, okay, rampage monsters do have a reason to be there, but right now I think that reason is not as strong as it should be, considering they are like the end point of all the monster forms. From the looks of things, I'd say it's probably safe to assume that potentially by the G expansion we will have the remaining deviants in the Apex forms that we already have the base forms of added to the game. So like Tigrex and Lagombi and all the rest of the monsters that have their deviant forms from GU that have not been added to the game yet, as of course it does seem like we are getting all the deviant monsters as Apexes bit by bit via the title updates and the other various updates that may come after. And yeah, it is nice to see, but I think the armor sets will add just a lot more weight to them coming in, as we would have a lot more skills to work with, and hopefully some very strong armor pieces that can replace some of the meta we have right now, as I think right now a lot of builds are consisting of like the Spio waist and maybe the Tio or Kushala helmet, the Rajang legs, and that generally is the base for most people, like if they don't have like the good charms. So it would be nice if that's mixed up a tiny bit and we do have some more armors from the quote-unquote lower tier monsters in their powerful forms, and just overall just mix up the game's meta a bit. It would be nice to see. And with that said, guys, that does bring us to the end of the video. If you did enjoy, be sure to smash the like, subscribe buttons. It's extremely appreciated and helps out the channel a lot. Be sure to drop a comment down below as well on all your thoughts on the game's endgame right now, as well as how you feel about Apex armors, as I'd love to know what you guys think. And don't forget to join our Discord, link is at the top of the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.